Thank you, Terry. Welcome to all of you out there in Cyberland and on the telephone hookup. It's good to have you with us. Title of today's study, Justice for All, is probably familiar to many of us, particularly to us older folks that would recognize it as the last phrase of the Pledge of Allegiance, which we recited every day at the start of school. I'm not sure when that faded from existence in the school system, but for sure it was a principle that was taught and was part of the moral fabric of this country for many years. Today we hear a lot about justice in the news. Whether or not justice will be served in a criminal case, as when somebody is murdered, will their loved ones receive justice? Exactly what is justice for them? We also hear a term used, social justice, wherein its context is trying to address systemic inequalities, which implies there are inequalities within the justice system. In this study, we will attempt to show the difference between justice used in Scripture and the worldviews of justice. A few years ago, Kathleen and I had a tenant file an unfounded discrimination complaint against us with the Montana Housing Authority. We quickly found out that the tenant only had to make the claim, provide no proof, and it was up to us to prove our innocence. We had to submit a response to his allegations with documentation showing the allegations were false. The tenant then responded with more allegations. Montana dismissed the case because the tenant had not made the claim within the 6-month time frame as to when the alleged incident took place, but would not comment on whether or not the tenant had a case so that he would be able to pursue another avenue. The tenant then filed a claim with HUD, which had a 2-year time frame from when the alleged incident took place. After multiple interviews with HUD and submitting documentation refuting the claim, HUD dismissed it. The tenant hired a lawyer to sue us for retaliating against him by evicting him because of his filing a claim, which would then be handled by district court. The case was dropped when our lawyer was going to subpoena the tenant's financial records of a car purchase he made after they had filed their Montana claim. During the course of these events, Kathleen was in a conversation with Alan and Sandy Hurst, telling the goings-on with this tenant since they were also involved in rentals. Alan told Kathleen that you may not get justice, but you will get a judgment. While the judgment from the Montana Housing was they waited too long to file their complaint, and the judgment from HUD was they didn't have a case, the lawsuit never made it to the point that a judgment was made. So we neither got a judgment or, in that case, or justice in all the cases. There was no justice because we had the expense of the legal fees and the trial of emotionally dealing with being falsely accused. This ordeal made it very obvious that there's a big difference between the justice spoken of in Scripture and the justice system of this country, or the world for that matter. First, let's take a look at how Google Artificial Intelligence defines justice. Justice in its simplest form is the concept of fairness and righteousness, often involving the impartial application of laws and the equitable distribution of rewards or punishments. It can also refer to the principle of conforming to truth, fact, or reason, or the quality of being just. Going on is Google AI's more detailed breakdown. Key aspects of justice: fairness and impartiality. Justice emphasizes treating individuals equitably without bias or favoritism. Moral rightness. It involves acting in accordance with what is morally right and just, and often involving ethical considerations. In law and order, justice is frequently associated with the legal system, including the enforcement of laws and the resolution of disputes through legal processes. Retribution and reward. Justice can involve assigning an appropriate consequence for actions, whether they are punishments or wrongdoings, or for wrongdoings, or rewards for positive actions. Social justice. This broader concept focuses on ensuring that all members of society have equal opportunity and rights, addressing systemic inequalities. The judicial system, courts and legal professionals strive to administer justice by fairly applying laws and ensuring due process. Social movements, or movements for social rights and social justice, aim to correct systemic injustices and ensure equal treatment for all. Personal ethics. Individuals can strive to act justly in their daily interactions, treating others with fairness and respect. Philosophical perspectives. Philosophers have debated the nature of justice for centuries, with the diverse perspectives on what constitutes a just society and how to achieve it. Classical thinkers like Aristotle and Plato explored justice as a virtue and a cornerstone of a well-functioning society. Modern philosophers like John Rawls have developed theories of justice that emphasize fairness, equality, and the protection of individual rights. In essence, justice is a multi-phase concept that encompasses fairness, moral rightness, and the equitable application of laws and principles. It is a fundamental value that societies strive to uphold through various institutions and individual actions. Now notice that justice is a concept with broad applications. Not only is justice a concept, so is fairness and righteousness. To see how it has evolved in the last couple hundred years, here is Webster's 1828 dictionary definition, written in the year 1828. The virtue which consists in giving to everyone what is his due, practical conformity to laws and to principles of rectitude in the dealings of men with each other, honesty, integrity in commerce, or mutual intercourse. Justice is distributive or commutative. Distributive justice belongs to magistrates or rulers and consists in distributing to every man that right or equity which the laws and the principles of equity require, or in deciding controversies according to the laws and principles of equity. Commutative justice consists in fair dealings in trade and mutual intercourse between man and man. Impartiality. Equal distribution of right in expressing opinions, fair representation of facts, respecting merit or demerit in criticisms, narrations, history, or discourse. Equity, agreeableness to right, vindictive retribution, merited punishment, right application of equity. All of that shows us that in 1828, justice is a virtue, and in 2025, it is a concept. That's just plain weird, considering that a concept is something conceived in the mind, a thought or a notion. The number one synonym for concept is idea. A virtue, on the other hand, is conformity to a standard of right, such as righteousness, goodness, or moral excellence. And the number one synonym for virtue is goodness. So how is it that justice, fairness, and righteousness is downgraded from a virtue to something conceived in the mind, a thought or a notion, a concept or an idea in the last 197 years? Is it to support a broader application for justice to allow for leniency in the justice system? Is it to include this new concept of social justice? Whatever the case, Scripture uses a Hebrew word that is translated to the English word justice. The word justice seems to fit best with what the Hebrew word conveys. But with the change of the definition over the years, that may no longer be true. The TS 2009 translation doesn't use the word justice at all in its translations, but translates the same Hebrew word or words that are translated as justice in the King James as right ruling or to do right, which in my opinion is a translation that best describes in English what Yehovah is telling us. If we are using the English words, Yehovah is not telling us just to make a judgment, but to make a right or righteous judgment. If we adhere to the modern definitions of justice, this complicates judgments made by the world, which considers all the social justice arguments of systemic injustices. Would the world make better or more right rulings by making justice a virtue again? But then that would mean bringing Yehovah back into our society. Let's consider what Micah 6, verses 6 through 8 says in our quest to understand what Yehovah's form of justice is, and how it is a virtue to him and not merely a concept or idea. Micah 6, starting in verse 6. Wherewith shall I come before Yehovah and bow myself before the high Elohim? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves of a year old? Will Yehovah be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has showed thee, O man, what is good. And what doth Yehovah require of thee? But to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy Elohim. The phrase, but to do justly, is translated in the New Revised Standard Version, but to do justice. In the Literal Standard Version, except to do judgment. And then the TS 2009, but to do right. These translations are all correct in their renderings if we accept the older definition of justice being a virtue. Since Yehovah requires this of us, then we must use discernment and wisdom to know what the right judgment is according to Yehovah's will. Let's turn over to 1 Kings 3, verses 5 through 12, and review Solomon's request for understanding, for an understanding heart and discernment. In 2 Chronicles, the same account, Solomon asks for knowledge and wisdom. In both passages, the goal is for Solomon to be able to judge Yehovah's people, which would better be rendered to rightly rule over Yehovah's people. 1 Kings 3, 5 through 12. In Gibeon, Yehovah appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and Elohim said, Ask what I shall give thee. And Solomon said, Thou hast showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept him for this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. And now, O Yehovah, my Elohim, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people, that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart, to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? And the speech pleased Jehovah, that Solomon had asked this thing. And Elohim said unto him, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked for riches for thyself, nor hast thou asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding, to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. What's weird to me is that in verse 9, Shema is used for understanding, and Bain is used for discern. Then in verse 11, the reverse. Shema is used for discern, and Bain is used for understanding. I don't have enough Hebrew knowledge to discern why that is. The word Bain is related to the word Bain, or Bain. It is the between used in the reference to kill the Passover lambs between the evenings in Exodus 12. Bain is H996, and Bain is H995, so that 995 is the root of H996. So would it be proper to understand that Bain is an understanding or a discernment between two or more positions, making the right choice? But let's consider that knowledge is required for understanding and for discernment. And without that knowledge, one cannot discern what is right. Quite a few years ago, I had to give a deposition over a lawsuit that the company I worked for had against another company for patent infringement. That same company had a lawsuit against the company I worked for the same reason, although different patents were involved. Since my name was included in one of the patents, I had to give a deposition for both lawsuits. The evening before I was to appear for one of the depositions, our lawyer called me in declaring that he was calling from his hotel room. After giving me a bunch of do's and don'ts, he asked me where he was calling from. Of course, I answered, your hotel room. He said, wrong answer. You do not know that. You can only go off of what I told you, and you cannot ascertain whether or not I am telling you the truth. The point is, only answer questions that you know to be true by your witness, not by assumption or being told by somebody else. Somebody is going to make a judgment in the case, and their knowledge needs to be based on what is factual. At first, I thought this to be a bit sleazy, but after being questioned for 8 hours with the opposing lawyer trying to put words in my mouth to back me in a corner, I could see the wisdom of our lawyer's comments. The whole point of the deposition is to find out what you know about the case, not what you've been told or what you think you know. The opposing lawyer is looking for something that can be exploited for their client. So as a person being questioned, one needs to think about whether or not you really know or witnessed, or is it something that you have been told. The point is, you cannot make a judgment without knowledge, and you need discernment and wisdom to give a righteous judgment or a right ruling. Turn to Proverbs 2. We'll read verses 1 through 11, where the context of this passage is focused on wisdom. and how it is related to justice, judgment, knowledge, understanding, and discernment. My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom, and apply thy heart to understanding. Yea, if you cry after knowledge, knowledge is binah, translated 34 out of 38 times as understanding. It comes from the root word bain, H995, we discussed earlier, and the New King James Version renders it as discernment. If you cry out for discernment and lift up thy voice for understanding, if thou seek her as silver and search for her as hid treasures, then thou shalt understand. And this is bain, discern, so you could read, then you shall discern the fear of Jehovah and find the knowledge of Elohim. For Jehovah gives wisdom, out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He lays up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keeps the paths of judgment and preserves the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand, discern righteousness, also translated as justice. Then you shall discern justice and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. When wisdom enters into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee. Out of this passage, we can see that wisdom is derived from knowledge, understanding, and discernment. As you can see in the notes, understanding is translated from two different Hebrew words, as is knowledge. I've included the alternate translations just to show that wisdom involves these different Hebrew words. Let's reread this passage without interruptions with the alternate translations. My son, if you will receive my words and protect my commandments with you, so that you attend to wisdom, you shall extend your heart to understanding. Yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasures, then you shall discern the fear of Jehovah and find the knowledge of Elohim. For Jehovah gives wisdom, out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He lays up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a shield to those who walk uprightly. He keeps the paths of right ruling and preserves the way of his saints. Then you shall discern justice and judgment and equity, yes, every good path. When wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is pleasing to your soul, discretion shall preserve you, understanding shall keep you. Does this make sense, that wisdom is the proper application of knowledge, understanding, and discernment? With proper application of knowledge, understanding, and discernment, you will get justice and right ruling or righteous judgment. Here is how Webster's 1828 dictionary defines wisdom. The right use or exercise of knowledge, the choice of laudable ends, and of the best means to accomplish them. This is wisdom in act, effect, or practice. If wisdom is to be considered as a faculty of the mind, it is the faculty of discerning or judging what is most just, proper, and useful. And if it is to be considered as an acquirement, it is the knowledge and use of what is best, most just, most proper, most conducive to prosperity or happiness. Wisdom in the first sense, or practical wisdom, is nearly synonymous with discretion. It differs somewhat from prudence in this respect. Prudence is the exercise of sound judgment in avoiding evils. Wisdom is the exercise of sound judgment either in avoiding evils or attempting good. Prudence, then, is a species of which wisdom is the genus. Wisdom gained by experience is of an inestimable value. The problem for us humans is we lack knowledge, both in our knowledge of Yehovah and our fellow man. While we can know what Yehovah tells us is true, it's been muddied up by man over the years through various traditions, doctrines, and translations. We can see how just the change in the definition over the course of a couple hundred years can change how we view something in Scripture. In our quest for knowledge, how can we know what someone teaches is true? We don't and can't read their minds and don't know their motivations. Many times, to get people to listen to a person's claims, they have knowledge revealed to them as part of their argument for added credibility. How can we know that their revealed knowledge is revealed by Yehovah? Well, rather than have an argument, let's have a deposition and ask a bunch of questions to see exactly how many answers and facts we really have. What is it that we really know? Does this knowledge glorify Yehovah? Does this knowledge edify the ecclesia? Does this knowledge promote spiritual growth? What is the scriptural evidence of this knowledge? Is the evidence presented historical, direct, or circumstantial? And which of these carry the most weight? Does this knowledge rely on here a little, there a little interpretation? Is this knowledge taken in the context it was given? Is this knowledge consistent throughout Scripture? Does this knowledge create conflicts within Scripture? And is this knowledge self-serving? Of course, the person with the new or revealed knowledge will give answers to these questions to best suit their own conclusions. But you are the lawyer in this deposition who is asking these questions. You have to use wisdom to discern and make a judgment as to whether they are righteous answers. You may ask, who am I to make such judgment? Isn't that the leadership's job? Consider Revelation 2:2. I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience, and how thou cannot bear them which are evil. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them to be liars. Of course, we know that this was written to the ecclesia in Ephesus. The ecclesia is translated as church to give credibility to leadership, but it is not the leadership. It's the assembly, the people, and they are the ones that have judged those that claim to be apostles. Consider also the people in Berea in Acts 17. They went to the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, to determine, judge, or discern what Apostle Paul was teaching was so. I suspect that the rabbis, leaders in the synagogue that Paul was teaching in, were doing all they could to counter the things that Paul was teaching. And it was the people being converted at that time that searched the scriptures and found it to be true in spite of what the leaders might have been telling them. Of course, that is my speculation, but it is not speculation that it was the scriptures that convinced the Bereans Paul's teachings were true and consistent with Scripture. Going back to my deposition spoken of earlier, there was a point that the opposing lawyer had me read a paragraph from our patent. After I was done reading it, he asked me to tell me what that meant in my own words. I thought a minute about it and thought that it was succinct in wording. I understood what it said and agreed with what it said, so I just read it again. He said, "No, I want you to say it in your own words. Don't just read what it says." At that point, I thought he was looking for something to back me into a corner, so I read it again. Now he was really upset and asked me if my lawyer had instructed me to do that, which wasn't the case, so I replied no. Then he asked me again to give my opinion in my own words. So I defiantly read the paragraph again, to which he replied, "We'll see what the judge has to say about this." The point for me was that the patent had all the information that he needed to draw a conclusion, to make his arguments, and the words written into the patent were reviewed by myself and 2 other individuals for accuracy before the patent was submitted. Isn't that what the Bereans were doing, looking to scriptures as the foundation of what they should be making their judgments from? My purpose was to make sure that what I said was consistent with the founding document, the patent. So what would be a better way than just reading from it? The Bereans wanted to make sure that Paul's teachings were consistent with the founding documents, the scriptures. And what better way to confirm than to just read from the scriptures? Now, of course, it can be a little more complicated today considering all the translations out there. They have biases of the translator and the doctrines of the various denominations the translator associates with. This is why we try to include some understanding of how the words are used in Scripture to help us better discern the intent and combat those biases. While most of this study shows that wisdom is the proper application of knowledge, understanding, and discernment within our study of Scripture and desire for knowledge, there is a more prominent virtue of this. It is our relationship with each other. Let's refer back to Micah 6:8. He has showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth Jehovah require of thee but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy Elohim. What is to do justly or to do what is right in this context? Wouldn't it be keeping Jehovah's commandments, which deal firstly with our loving Jehovah and secondly with our love for our fellow man? Another translation of the phrase to love mercy is to love kindness, which also deals with our fellow man. We make judgments of our fellow man based on what we think we know, what others may have told us, and also based on our experiences, which is what we know. What happens if we throw the first 2 of those out and just go by what we've witnessed, and then we love mercy in our judgments of our fellow man? Remember that we are all in a fallen state, and true enough, we are trying to overcome this. And in this verse is a summary of doing just that. Do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our Elohim. Let's conclude with Ecclesiastes 12:9-14. And besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, and he listened and sought out, set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find out words of delight and words of truth rightly written. The words of the wise are like goads, and as nails driven by the masters of collections. They were given by one shepherd. And besides these, my son, be warned. The making of many books has no end, and much study is wearying of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the entire matter. Fear Elohim, guard his commands, for this applies to all mankind. For Elohim shall bring every work into right ruling, including all that is hidden, whether good or evil. There is a warning in this that the making of many books has no end. We have witnessed this. Pick a topic from Scripture and you will find countless books and articles written on it. If you study these books of said topic, you will be wearied, and that is a warning. The conclusion of the matter: fear Jehovah, guard his commands, for this applies to all mankind. For Elohim shall bring every work into right ruling, including all that is hidden, whether good or whether evil.